Today, I'm so excited to get to talk to Emily Heavner, who is one of the most brilliant and also delightful humans that I get to work with. She is currently a product manager at Aspect who carries a PhD in mathematics. You can correct me if I'm wrong here. I don't think she would call herself an expert, but I am going to call her an expert even if she protests. And I'm saying this right now. So I'm just going to say that.
Nice.
But I think Emily is so knowledgeable when it comes to creating actually helpful AI solutions. So before your eyes glaze over and you skip to your next podcast, this isn't like we're just going to talk about AI taking our jobs or that AI is going to save the world. My goal here today is to take a nuanced look at how AI can and will support actual work, and whether that's parsing large volumes of data into usable information so that it can support decision making done by leaders and doers in their workplaces. Emily is at the forefront of all that at Aspect, taking an approach to AI that is secure, intentional, and human aware. And honestly, I just feel really privileged to get to sit and talk about it with you and also get to work with you on this.
Oh, okay. Well, conversation over. Can't beat that. Like,
No pressure.
yeah, really hyping me up, Michelle. Thank you.
Yes. Yes. I did just want to tell you how privileged I feel that we get to have this conversation, because I am absolutely one of those people who's like, AI, it exists. And I don't really know a lot more than that, honestly. So I'm
Nice.
excited to get into this. So I do want to start talking about a little bit about you, and how you ended up here. So will you just take us through the pieces of your story that you would like to share from, if that includes your PhD, and how you ended up here doing this at Aspect?
Yeah, I'm really interested, if I were to describe like what do you want to be when you grow up? I really just like learning new things and solving problems, which I think really kind of go hand in hand. But I think really go hand in hand here at Aspect. Obviously, very easy to lean into a PhD when you're like, I just want to learn new things and solve problems. Um, I never heard about workforce until I was on the job market, and I started here at Aspect doing more algorithm development work. And I met with my then manager, Andy Cornell, who's now very high up research development at the company. And we just had such great conversations. He was like, this is where I really see our company growing when it comes to algorithm development. We didn't really talk necessarily about AI at the time. We were just like, let's, have these conversations about what workforce looks like, how data plays such a huge role in this, from just these nuanced decisions that people have to make at a sometimes a split real time. And I don't know, I just really loved like the culture itself here, as well as the cool things that I would get to learn, the cool problems that I would get to solve. And then moving into my product management role has really been like I get to do really cool research and play around with these models with test data, with like customer approved data, things like that, which I get a lot of joy in, and being like, wow, I think this particular model will work, and it does, or sometimes it doesn't. But then I'm like, okay, well my hypothesis was wrong. Why didn't it work? Kind of thing. Yeah, so that's kind of my very short, I think, career journey.
Excellent. Okay, so I think, will you give a little bit of a definition on when you talk about algorithm development? Because I think probably a lot of people's experience with the algorithm, sorry about the air quotes, is, like the internet is like social media and, the all powerful algorithms. So I'm assuming that's not what you're working on. So will you kind of just share what is that as you talk about it?
Yeah, I think of an algorithm as a recipe, right? follow these steps to get this result. Um, so it could be as simple as in a workforce world, writing a forecasting algorithm. Follow these steps to get a forecast for tomorrow, whatever that forecast might be. Um, or the all knowing algorithm in social media is follow this algorithm to get these recommendations for these people or these posts or whatever, right? It's a very broad term that just means here's a to-do list that somebody coded up or wrote up or whatever that you follow through.
Oh my God, that was such a great definition. I love that. Do you feel like that work led you into sort of what you're working on in AI? Like, did that feel like a natural transition?
Yeah, I'm really passionate about something called math modeling, which is a fancy way of saying I like to describe the real world using equations. So, if you've ever heard of the equation like E equals MC squared, I feel like that's like people have potentially heard about that. That is by definition a mathematical model. It's just saying, I'm going to describe something using an equation. And, obviously you can't do everything perfect in an equation, but what's really cool is you have to know that system so well to come up with an equation that describes that. And that's really what, like, I get so excited because you learn something new and you solve that problem, right? It hits those like really big things that I'm interested in. So for me, the idea of AI and machine learning like feeds really well into that. And I get really excited when I talk about kind of what people define as like the black box in AI and machine learning because I'm like, well, that's the cool stuff. Like, yeah, it is really cool that you can feed it information, a question, data, and then get an output. But I'm like, I want to know what's going on inside.
I feel like there's so much to learn when it comes to like what makes that tick. So, and I'm guessing there are a lot of listeners who are like that as well. So, probably the question how does AI work is too broad, but can you talk us through like what's a good understanding of AI for us to kind of go forward in this conversation with?
Yeah. So I guess kind of starting a little bit before AI, what maybe isn't AI. If we throw back to our, I don't know, when you learn this, high school, middle school, you have some sort of equation, I don't know, like y equals mx plus b, or even just some equation that's like x plus 2. The idea is that you have that equation, you have that form, you input something, you know what you're inputting it into, and then you output something, right? It's like if you, going back to that recipe example, it's like you know the recipe when you start baking or cooking or whatever, right? The cool thing about machine learning AI models is you don't start with that recipe or that equation.
Mm,
You start with the data and you say, for AI, it's all about data. It thrives on data. If the data is not there, then the algorithm isn't there, right? Or the AI isn't there. So the idea behind AI is that we're replicating how humans learn, which sounds like when you think about it like that, it sounds so sci-fi and so fancy, and you're like, that sounds really scary, right? What it boils down to, very, very simple, 5-year-old level, is you are figuring out the equation that's specific to that data, right? So if we started with that x plus 2, and we say this is kind of the black box, I'm going to input data in, add 2 to it, and then output data. And now it's like, well, I have this data, but I don't know what the equation is. And so I am going to figure that out by having the computer really learn so much about that data. For people who like concrete examples and a little bit more visuals, if you said, I want to create a AI that'll tell me if I have a picture of a cat. That's it. It'll just say cat or not cat. So you say, cool, here's a bunch of pictures of cats' faces. And you say, cool, here it is. And what it's doing under the hood is it's saying, oh, I've noticed that all the pictures you've given me have pointy ears and small little noses, and maybe this is the structure of their faces, and it will assign almost like weight and say, "Oh, it's really important for cats to have like pointy ears," right? And then you send it a picture of a dog that's really floppy, and you say, "Oh, no, 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 that doesn't match with my understanding of a cat," right? And so what's going on is it's just basically almost like prioritizing and saying, "This is the important thing about this data. This is the pattern that I'm picking up so that if I see this again, I can identify it." Kind of like a low level. Does that make sense?
Sense. Such a good explanation. And I think, as you were saying, it sort of replicates the way that humans learn. I have a 4-year old. And so that totally tracks with the way that she is sort of approaching the world. So, like, I especially see it in her language, where we've been watching a lot of K pop Demon Hunters. I don't know if you had a reason to
Yeah.
watch that, but it's really wonderful. But there's a bit at the end, I won't spoil and say what happens, but there is a bit where she doesn't have the word for what's happening, and she's like it breaks. Like she has like she's like, this is the only concept I have that's even close. And I'm like, okay, yeah, but that is, if you sort of like pare back what's happening, like, yes, that word does make sense there. I know exactly what you're talking about. Where like I have a 6-year old and an 8-year old, and they, watching them, like the 6-year old has a little bit more of that vocabulary, and the 8-year old has a lot more of that. Like, oh, but I am not only seeing what's happening, I understand why that's happening and why it's important for the story. So I see kind of, what you're saying, like, okay, I've got this cat and it's got pointy ears, but also here's like an elf that has pointy ears. Like, what other things are important than just the pointy ear? Anyway, so that was a great explanation.
Yeah, yeah. And you'll like kind of expanding on that, we we say, "Cool, here's all this data. Did you learn anything or did you just memorize it?" Right? And I think this kind of goes to not, obviously not your kids, Michelle, but some kids when they're learning how to read, they just like memorize their favorite book and they're like, "Look, I can read." And so then we have to be like, "Okay, but did you just memorize all these pictures of a cat or can you like identify a new cat from a new image?" And so there's also that aspect of
Love
of needing to like nice, nice. Of needing to make sure that the kind of black box, this function where you're putting these parameters are not um, too focused on specific aspects of that image so that if you could like handed it a brand new picture of a cat, it could say it's a cat. Or this is how you know if it's your function, the inside the black box, all those kind of parameters and weights are not set up correctly is when you hand it an elf and it says it's a cat and you say, "Oh no." Right? And this is where you'll see things like just, general public people are like talking about, "Oh, but I told it this and it gave me this," right? And that's really just how it learned. And as develop your machine learning model, the hope is that that doesn't happen.
that. We were at like a science thing for my daughter's school, and they had there's like a Google game that I can't remember what it's called, but it's trying to guess what you're drawing. So it gives you like some options to draw, and then you're drawing one of the options. I'm pretty sure that's how it works. And it's trying to guess what you're drawing based on the way you start it. And it's essentially teaching teaching this model, like, oh, here's how people draw strawberries. This is the way people draw a race car or whatever. And so it was really interesting because at the end, it like kind of hones in, like, here's why I guessed that that was a race car, even though you were actually drawing a bed. Like, this is what other people drew when they were drawing. So anyway, super interesting. All right, so coming back to the workplace, what are some common misconceptions that maybe we all have about AI when it comes to the workforce? We'll say besides the obvious, like AI is taking our jobs.
One thing that I noticed people talking about AI is there's like an equation, like correlation to automation, right? So And I think it makes sense, right? You ask an AI something and you like immediately get an answer. But I think something that I've noticed is that you can have automation without adding any AI, right? And you can have AI that may not be exactly automatic. And so I think that's something that I've noticed is if you're like, wow, I just really want something to be automatic, maybe it doesn't need to be some fancy AI tool that you spend a lot of time developing or spend a lot of time investing in, right? Maybe it's just you have an automation.
Like maybe that email just schedule you could just do a schedule send, right? Like that's an automation, not AI.
Yeah, right. But then if you say, well, I want to email 500 people as opposed to just like one person, and I do this if a colleague is out of office, I'm like, well, I'll just schedule this for later on, right? They don't need to see it right now, but I have the time to write it right now versus I'm going to email five different people, completely different emails with different context, right? Maybe that's like, okay, I need some help with
Well, do you think, and obviously this is just kind of maybe in your experience, so it's in like a bit of our small world at aspect. Do you feel like AI has really entered the workforce, or do you think that there's still like a bit of like a trust issue there where it's like, well, can I put this in AI, or does it know?
Yeah, I mean, I think for our day to day, like we have an internal AI tool that, for example, I just heard was able to like pull in a bunch of data and fill that like some of the missing columns in. I think they said there was like 37,000 rows of data, and it took our tool a couple hours to do, but that's a couple hours that somebody didn't have to manually fill in these um particular pieces of data that they were looking for. Um, a lot of people are using some form of note taking when it comes to like AI tools, which I think is really great because it gives you the chance to have that interaction, especially when somebody's like fully remote and they're like, "Oh, cool. Well, let me like also make these notes." But now you can be really engaged, focus in the conversation. Maybe if you need to write down an action item because you're like, "I really, really don't want to forget this or something," and then you can, hold on to those notes and not necessarily like have them hanging around. I think it really depends on like the use case of you yourself. Some people say I want to have like a draft of an email and, have some sort of tool start where you say I'm emailing this person and then I'm just going to edit it, right? It saves me a little bit of time. And I think that's the best use case for AI is to have it as a tool that makes your life efficient and time saving, and depending on who you are and your preference, people have different sizes of tools and tool needs, and carpenters and people who are really really AI um passionate and hungry, might have a whole shed of their AI tools, and some people who rent a small studio apartment may just have a hammer, and that's okay, right? Because they have other ways that they can get this information. It may not be their needs. um so I think day to day, there are probably just within our company people who are using an internal tool, and there are people who are not. And I think there's really no right or wrong. It's just what you're comfortable with, how you want to spend your time, and your energy and resources. And I will say, when it comes to security, like when you ask, should I trust this? I think um, depending on like, if you're just a not necessarily somebody in like security or IT or somebody who implemented this tool to add on, you can always verify with the person who's like the owner of that tool at your company to say, hey, have you guys done any sort of privacy policies, data governance, like what are we doing to ensure that our internal information that's running through this tool doesn't get out? So you can definitely do that. or you can trust that those people have done that for you. Um, and also, if your company says don't specifically use this AI tool, don't use it because they haven't gone through to verify that that data is safe. So,
Appreciate your metaphor on, like, I've got a whole tool shed, or I just am using a hammer, and that, it's got to be the right tool for the right set, and you also have to know how to use it, right? Like, for me, I starting from blank in an email is no problem. I just like knock it out, like blah blah blah. Like my brain is always thinking that way. But when it comes to something like, I need to reformat this whole page, or like, you know, uh, I need this Excel doc to look a certain way. Like, I can't do that. It would be way, it's so much easier for me to say, like, hey, in Notion, like, hey, can you just reformat this page to be a table? And it's like, yeah, done. I did it for you.
yeah, I think that's what that's when it's a really powerful tool in the sense of not everybody has the same strength. Right? And for some people, it really does take a lot of time and energy to do one of the things you mentioned. And they say, cool, let's just have this assist help me out versus, okay, I don't want to do this task. I may be putting it off because I don't want to do this task, or it's become so overwhelming. And now it's such a big deal just to send this one email, right? Um, yeah, I really appreciate that call out, Michelle. I think that's like exactly perfect.
What is it that we should not be relying on AI for?
Mm, I think if you're if it doesn't align with your core values in the sense of if you're like a call center and it's so important that you have that human interaction, you shouldn't have a an AI, answering your calls or emails. If it's so important for you to like your data security, maybe due to like legal reasons or who you are as a company to have, I don't know, credit card numbers going through an AI or something like that. If like that doesn't align with your priorities, don't use AI, right? I think that's yeah, that's to me, I think the really important thing is think about what would be a huge issue, a negative impact if people found out, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you're using AI to talk to me when I'm, this is the chart, like the fees that I'm paying for these human interactions, right? Whatever your kind of luxury brands are, things like that."
I think that's such a wise call out, because it always comes back to that, doesn't it? Like, okay, what should I be doing? It needs to come and line up with, like, okay, do I know the core value of what I have, and like what I'm trying to do? And AI isn't any different. Like, the tool needs to still line up with that, value statement that's at the center.
Mhm. Yeah, I know you mentioned like Notion earlier, right? This is a productivity tool, so it makes sense that it would have AI that affects and boosts somebody's productivity, And so they've made their AI use case as something that aligns with their values in their course.
So, on maybe the flip side of that, where are you seeing, like, oh, like, that's such a great use? Maybe that's the best way that, like, AI is being used. We've talked about kind of that improvement in productivity, but are there other places, like, maybe you can just best describe how you're seeing AI used well?
Oh gosh, that I feel like that's so hard because like, I think really the best like a good AI besides just like a well-built model is really only as good as its use case, right? It's like everything. If you say, "I've built this grand thing," like this beautiful looking piece of pie, and then you eat it and it's not great. It doesn't taste great. So it's like, well, why why'd you spend all that time doing that, it's the same kind of thing with AI. It's just like, well, it's great if this is good, but if I'm not going to use it, why build it? So I think it depends on the use case, but I really think something that because AI loves data and will just gobble it up, if it's not helping you make decisions based on data, then I don't like, I guess I want to say that that is really where it shines. I don't want to say that it's like poor if it's not, but I think that's really where it shines, is being able to say, "Hey, I've, had other emails read through me, and now I can make a new email from scratch, right?" And so how it just like loves that data and says, "Cool, I can make a decision. I've noticed, your volume coming in looks like this, and the last time it looked like this, you had to call in 3 new people," you know? Based on that, things like that. And so sending a message of, "Hey, I've noticed this. Would you like to make this decision?" Or a really great example when you're driving on a road trip, "Hey, there's a speed down ahead. Would you like to take an alternate route?" Right? Those kind of, I'm looking at data and I want to help you make a decision.
Just today, I had to look at a big policy document for one tiny question, and I'm like, "I have to sift through all this legalese for, like, one question?" I was like, "Oh, no, this is in my, like, approved productivity tool, and I have, like, an AI that can burn through this whole thing for me. Hey, does this document address this question?" And it's like, "Yes, and here's where it is." Like, oh, like, I think that, like, not having to, like, prime my brain to read through, like, 30 pages of legalese that is not my native language, and being able to just say, like, "This is the information I'm looking for. Can you help me find it?"
I like it in terms of the use case, right? So we just talked a little bit about AI use cases. Are we able to, what are really good use cases? Thinking about things that are efficient, save us time, right? So when we think about making dinner, right, of any variety, sometimes it's as easy as heating up food in a microwave, right? And sometimes that's a great use case for an AI, right? It's just being like, "Cool, I'm gonna save time. I'm not gonna make this on the stove. I'm, gonna have microwave pizza instead of oven pizza," whatever might be. Like, everyone's lives are busy, everyone has different priorities, and if you want to microwave your food to save you time, you can, right? Um, but there are some cases where somebody might say, "Man, I cannot do microwave pizza. That's a no-go for me." And that's a use case where you say, "Okay, great. I don't want to use AI. I want to take the time to, run out, pay the price to maybe get pizza, make it at home, whatever it is," right? And that tool of a microwave originally just meant to save you time and energy. And it's the same idea with this AI. When it's done well, it's really just meant to save you time and energy. And if you want to put your energy and not using it, that's totally fine, right? You don't have to. It is one of the tools in your kitchen, not the tool in your kitchen.
My dad would also say, like, he could never have microwave pizza.
Yeah, yeah. But some people so passionate, right? I could never start an email from the scratch, right? And other
Yeah.
people like Michelle, no big deal. I can start an email from scratch.
That's I like the I feel like it's really easy because AI is at the forefront of it. Feels like every conversation, any blog ever that has been written in the last like couple of years, it's like AI, like it's clickbait almost. And so I like that you've sort of like, okay, no, 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 that's not really what it is. It is a tool that exists in your kitchen, but it is not the kitchen.
Yeah, and I think that's really what we're doing at Aspect, is we're using it as a tool to help you, but we also understand, if you talk to people in the workforce field, they have so much knowledge. They have been in this field and in this domain for years and years and years. I feel like I have conversations with people all the time and I'm like, that is like I'm just, yes, let me osmosis through you, you know? Um, and so I don't know, they've just seen things. They've lived in those like really intense high call volume where they didn't expect it and they had to move things around, right? And they they know their patterns really well. They know like what to expect, how they can shift when they don't know what to expect. And so I don't want to like unvalidate that, right? And we at Aspect don't want to unvalidate that because there's really nothing that can replace that. There's no way that we can put everybody's 30 plus years of knowledge into this one model and say, go be free, right? But we can help support you
Yeah,
in the best
sure.
way.
Yeah, I like that picture. So as we sort of wrap things, I we always try to end with kind of the, like three main things that we could go take action on. So as we're thinking about leaders in the workplace, what are some green flags or red flags that leaders should be looking for an AI system that is like well designed or, being used thoughtfully?
Yeah, I think, I've mentioned this, but what sets AI apart from just any other mathematical equation is that the AI model is shaped and defined and constructed on data, right? You mathematically, if you don't use AI, you just say, cool, this is what I'm going to use, and hopefully it works well with the data. Um, and so I think for leaders, like being able to understand what like data quality they have, so what they're feeding into the model, is that really good? What is, if it's something they're developing or something they're using third party, what's the privacy policy? For some people, it's not a big deal that the data that they're feeding in gets used later on to train the model. Some people, it is, right? And so making sure that privacy policy, if they're developing something in-house, that data is set up to where they can easily, it always cycles and flows through that model, right? So you say, cool, here's data, here's another batch, but you want to make sure that your data kind of is the foundation for everything. So it's clean, it's set up well, it's being fed in well. Um, Also looking at, besides data privacy policy, any sort of compliance or data governance. If you're not familiar with that, I don't know if that's like a common term, but it's basically like a company's policy and like best practices for how they use your data, how they store your data, um, how they manage your data, things like that. I think those are things, yeah, if you want to use any AI, it's just all about the data. If you feed it bad data and you say, show me pictures of cats, and you only show them, feed it dogs, it's probably not going to
Ah,
identify the cat very
yeah,
well.
right. Making sure you have good data. And I think you were saying like, and that it's well set up.
Yeah, and I think also, I mean, if this is a tool that you want to keep using, you want it to, the kind of like feed through to be cyclical, if you will. And so taking the time to front load the kind of data read in, the data quality is nothing but helpful to you in the long run.
Can you say more about that? Like the idea that it's cyclical?
Usually, when you create very much like a child, right? You start at 4, kind of going back to your example, Michelle, your 4-year-old was able to, or let's like your 8-year-old was able to comprehend something a little bit more than your 4-year-old because of their knowledge, right? They've spent more time, they've learned more things, their context, all that good stuff, right? And it's nothing against your 4-year-old. It's just that your 8-year-old has had a lot more data,
Yeah,
right?
he's got double the data.
Yes. And it's the same kind of idea for a model, is that if you want it to improve, you have to give it more data, right? And so you don't necessarily want to just say, "Cool, I've dumped all of this. See ya in 3 years." You know?
Right.
It's okay, cool. I've given you all of this. We've kind of tweaked all these different parameters inside, and we have an AI model. Woohoo. Okay, great. And then we say, the next day, the next month, the next quarter, whatever. Okay, here is a huge other batch of data, and we want you to learn on that now, right? We don't want you to forget the other stuff, but you now have a bunch of cool new things to learn. And so that's really where it's not just a one process where it says, okay, bam, dump all the data, here we go. It's consistently using that data. And so if you don't have that like infrastructure set up, then it's really hard to make that workflow clean and consistent and easy.
My phone is always trying to say, like, this is a picture of your daughter. But my daughter has been growing for her whole life. So they're like, this is a picture of your daughter, and it's her when she's like 2. But without telling it, this is also a picture of my daughter who is now 8. Like it can't like make the jump to like, it hasn't like, made that cycle where it's like, oh, that's the same person. You have to keep telling it, like, yes, we've grown now as an organization. So here's more data. Is that a good?
Yeah, and even, thinking about things like your ACD data coming in, right? It's okay, well, you've gotten so much more in the last week. If we want something that'll distinguish patterns and give you, some sort of notification like, oh, something's going on, maybe you want to check it out, right? Then you need to be able to pull that data in so that it has the most up to date knowledge.
So what would you say for someone who wants to learn a bit more about, like, how could I make the best use uh, of AI in my workplace? Where's somewhere that they could look like in the next 5 minutes? Like, this is a good starting place to go get a little bit more education.
I think using a tool, like if you've never once used an AI tool, open it up, ask it, I don't know, like what's the history of lasagna? What's the average temperature of Jupiter? Like whatever you're just something really curious about. So if you've never once used a tool, give it a go. One of the things like my husband and I just did was we gave dates, like time frames. So this is where we're gonna be on vacation. Can you give us a like itinerary, and then we say, "Oh, cool, we want to go there, we don't want to go there." We even included this is exactly where we want to go this time of day, and it like fit it in, right? So I think education, give it a try it out. If there's a tool that your company's thinking about using, see if you can, send an email to ask for a demo. Quick 5-minute thing, and then you can learn more about it. You can say, "Here is my data. Can I test on your your AI tool?"
Yeah. I love that. And maybe, you'll learn a little more about the history of lasagna.
Yeah, and then maybe share it because I don't actually know the history of lasagna.
I was just like, oh, I wonder why that is.
Yeah, yeah, no idea. But I would be interested in learning.
Yes, exactly, exactly. Well, thank you so much. I feel like I learned a lot, and you just gave me a lot of, I don't know, I feel like just more settled around the idea of AI, just like as a concept and using it. And it just feels a little more like, okay, but this isn't like some crazy new thing that is impossible to understand. Instead, like it's still this thing where like we're going to find our core values, we're going to stick to it, and then we can use this as a tool just like other tools that we have always used in our tool belts to kind of do this thing more efficiently or just in a different way.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't wanna ramble, but I think in case you're curious about some of, like, the history of I mean, it was probably, like, 40s and 50s, like, 1940s and 50s when it kind of first was this idea that, researchers were really into, and then had its kind of big experiment and like ebbs and flows of research. And then in 2017, there was prior to that, there's kind of this point of, well, there's a big scaling issue. Like there's only so much data that we can use to train on. And I think it was Google who originally basically discovered something to fix this. And this was really big in academia. This was like, whoa, what you're doing is super cool. And then ChatGPT, the company who created that, used that. Couple years go by, and then 2020 they released the first like ChatGPT, and that's really where it blew up. But it's been in the background for for a while.
Yes, yes. I was just listening to another podcast about like this isn't like a new concept. There was for so long like no one could picture using the internet. Like how could you possibly like go on and just like ask a question and find someone who's written about the answer. And now like that is, second nature. Like I don't know who the person was who's in that movie. I'll just look it up. Right?
Yeah.
But that and it just and the idea that like, AI, not new, it will eventually kind of be just like a part of what we do instead of this honestly, this like clickbaity kind of thing that's like feels scary.
Yeah, yeah, and it goes back to who you are as a person. Do you want a shed full like, do you need that or you just need the hammer? It's up to you and how you wanna use AI. Like, there are people who have smartphones and look things up all the time, and people who don't have smartphones and don't, search and Google, and it's up to you, and nothing's wrong with that.
Yes, and we can
Yeah.
and both live full complete lives.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Emily. This was amazing and I'm so thankful that I get to not only have this conversation with you but also work with you.
Yeah, yeah, I know, it's always lovely to talk to you, Michelle.
Thank you so much for listening to Future Works. If this gave you something to think about, please pass it on, share it with someone that you know that might be interested in this topic, and then, go get coffee with them and chat about it in real life. You can find Emily at ehefner.com. That's EHEAVNER.com. And follow along at aspect.com as the AI strategy at Aspect continues to take shape and grow, and you can be on the forefront of keeping up with that. Be sure you subscribe as well so you don't miss our next conversation here on Future Works.